We've spent a considerable amount of time looking at apartment leases, rental agreements, understanding how those function, the rules or the provisions within them. I want to talk about what leads and what comes before that apartment lease, such as moving expenses and the expenses that occur within the realm of living on your own. So first thing to consider is before we even get to the security deposit and we get to those before we get to the security deposit and the expenses of living on your own, I want to talk about understanding what moving expenses you would have. So let's think about when you decide to move out on your own into your first apartment, or you're moving to college, what expenses can you anticipate? You may think you're planning on having your friends help you instead of hiring a moving company, but more than likely you're going to need a truck. As far as labor, if you're planning on not hiring a company but having your friends help you, you will probably have to trade off. Instead of paying them, you'll have to provide them probably some pizza and some snacks, something for them to eat and give them the energy they need to carry and lug all your stuff around. You're going to need, so the moving truck, you're going to need labor, which is help from friends and family. You're going to need your first month's rent. Be aware of that. We've discussed you're going to need your security deposit. You're going to want to also have renter's insurance. Now, something to consider. If your rent, let's say you're moving into an apartment and your rent is $800 a month, many people believe, well, I've got the $800 and I make the $800 at least that much every month, I can afford that. You want to be aware that the security deposit's usually going to be first month's rent or more, so you have to have that in place. You're going to need the renter's insurance. You're going to need a security deposit for, ready for this, utilities. So if you plan on having cable, a landline for internet, if you plan on having power and gas, those utilities will likely require a security deposit from you. And that could be 1 month to 3 to 6 months worth of usage. So if your average monthly bill would be $30 of consumption and they want 3 months, you're talking about a $90 deposit for gas, and then a deposit for electric, and then a deposit for the internet line. So you have to be aware of those expenses. If you're looking at a security deposit and first month's rent, that'd be $800 times 2. That's $1,600. Plus what it costs to rent a truck and the pizza to help your friends move. There are a lot of expenses that get rolled into this before you even get into the expenses of your monthly budget when you're on your own. When you do move out on your own, I want you to be aware of the different type of expenses that are out there. There are fixed and variable. So in a budget, you're going to have fixed and variable expenses. What is an example of a fixed expense? Well, what is a fixed expense? It's precisely an expense that is locked in and it doesn't change from month to month. So your rent is a fixed expense. It's not going to change. So it's not like if you spent half the time, half of the month in your apartment and it's $800 a month rent, you don't suddenly have to pay only $400 because you were in the apartment only half the time. Your rent is fixed, and your lease says what your rent is going to be every month for the length of the lease, which would be typically 12 months. So regardless if you're in the apartment 1 day or 30 days that month, the rent is always the same and it's locked in. And in this example I'm using is $800. So rent is a fixed expense. Another fixed expense would be if you have a car payment, would be your car loan or your car note. Again, not based on how much you use the vehicle, your car payment is going to be the same because the terms are set in the contract of your financing. Now, how much gas you use to drive your car around, that will vary. So if you drove a lot this month, or if you just parked the car and you didn't want to move it, then that means you didn't pay for parking downtown, you didn't pay for meters, you didn't pay for tolls, you didn't pay to burn gas. So a gas fuel for your vehicle is a variable expense, but the car payment itself, rent itself, will not vary. Renter's insurance. Renter's insurance for your apartment and vehicle insurance. These are going to be the same every month. They are fixed. They don't change. They're not going to vary on you. Now, the difference between renter's insurance, when you get renter's insurance, if you have an apartment, is that you are protecting your belongings inside of the apartment, within the walls of the apartment. You don't have to get insurance for the building that you live in. That's for the landlord to do. So if the building were to catch fire or be hit by lightning, and half of the building is singed, and while nothing in your apartment is set on fire or burned, because you're on the other side, it may well all be ruined because it smells like smoke. So the landlord's insurance for his property or her property will cover the repairing of the building. You want insurance so that your items within the building, within your apartment, are protected. Because the landlord's not going to insure your laptop, your furniture, your microwave, your personal belongings. That's your responsibility. And that rent, that insurance premium per month is going to be the same month after month. Your vehicle insurance will be the same month after month. So if we understand that fixed expenses are expenses that don't change, then what would be examples of expenses that do change? Well, gas was one of them. Another is food or groceries, right? And I'm putting down food because if you're spending money going out to eat, or if you're going to the grocery store, some months you may buy and spend more on groceries because you're hosting and you're having people over, or other months you may spend more on going out to eat and you spend less on groceries. So that's going to vary. What else will vary are going to be your utilities. So your electric bill, your gas bill, and this is different from the gas you put in your car. But if it's the summer and you use gas to heat your apartment, you're not going to be heating your apartment in the summer. So your gas is going to be much lower in the summer. But what will be higher in the summer will be your electric bill because you use that to power the air conditioner. So ultimately, variable expenses are going to fluctuate and they're going to change from month to month based on your usage. Fixed expenses are not going to be driven by your usage. They're locked in by the terms of an agreement or a contract. And that's the difference between fixed and variable expenses. Your security deposit, we talked about that. That is utilized specifically for protecting the landlord if you were to skip payment on your rent, if you were to trash the apartment, or if you didn't clean the apartment on your way out. Whose responsibility is it to maintain the apartment while you're residing within the apartment? Well, that's your responsibility, not to damage the property and make sure it remains in good condition. Whose responsibility is it to clean up after you leave? If there's spilled cereal all over the floor, if there's ink from an exploded pen, or food that just, dried up and caked on the kitchen counter. Well, that's your responsibility to clean it. But if you don't do those things, if you don't leave the apartment the way that you found it, which should have been in a clean, nice order, then the landlord has the ability to use that security deposit to pay a cleaning service to come in and do the cleaning that you did not do. So if you want to get all of your security deposit back, you want to make sure that you make your rent payments on time, you don't accrue any late fees, and that you don't damage the property, and you leave it clean when you leave. Moving expenses, security deposit, fixed versus variable expenses. The last thing I'll cover is that, or as a reminder or a recap, is that any lease, any contract that is drawn up properly is designed to protect both parties. It's not designed to give the landlord more rights than the tenant, or to give the tenant more rights over the landlord. If it's drawn up properly, it's going to protect both parties equally. If you have any questions, let me know.